All right. So I'm on the phone here with Don Graham. Don's from, you're from whereabouts in Montana, Don? Do you want to share where you're from or just Montana's good?
I live in southwest Montana.
Southwest Montana. Man, that is one of the biggest places on my bucket list of places to see. I've been through Montana, but I've never spent any time there, and I sure want to.
I was definitely an outdoorsman's paradise.
I bet. And so obviously, you're an outdoorsman yourself, hunting fish and
Yes, sir.
yeah, right on, right on. So, just for people watching here, so Don was kind enough to reach out to me via email to share an experience that he had with these people, and on a hunting trip, I believe it was. And I asked Don if he would be interested in a video call. I try to call everybody after an email. Try to reach out just to say thank you and have a chat. And I thought this time I'd turn things around a little bit, and rather than read the email, I thought we'd hear it right from the man himself. So Don's going to sort of go through what happened, and just yeah, Don, you know what? Just sort of run us through what happened, and so this encounter that you emailed me, was this your very first encounter with these people?
No, actually, my brother-in-law and I had an encounter back in '85
Oh yeah.
in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest.
Okay, were you hunting
It was
hunting then as well?
it was archery season, and I just shot a deer that morning. And that evening, there was something up on the ridge behind us. I mean, that screamed were just horrendous, and it started rolling rocks down the hill. It was a tall ridge above us. We actually jumped in my Bronco and took off.
Is that
Came
right?
back the next day, and there were boulders and all kinds of stuff, rocks and stuff in our camp. Yeah,
Wow. Wow. How far away was it from you?
it's so if it was actually up on the top of the ridge, it was probably 200-300 yards, maybe.
And like anything else you'd ever heard before out in the woods?
No,
No.
nope, never heard anything like that.
So obviously going back to 85, you're kind of like me. You've spent your life out in the mountains hunting, fishing, hiking, exploring.
Absolutely.
So this is coming from someone that knows the sounds, knows the animals, and that's why I ask if it's anything you'd ever heard before, because generally it's not.
No, it was nothing I'd ever heard before, and I have not since heard that. But
Right.
my brother-in-law still talks about it.
So in 85, when you heard that, Don, were you aware of these things before that encounter? Like, did you know? I mean, was it
Oh,
something?
definitely we were.
Yeah,
We were definitely because it. I grew up in Skamania County, and it's the only county in the state of or the United States that has an ordinance against shooting Bigfoot,
is that right?
and that was put into place in the '70s. So they had in search of came out to Stevenson, Carson area and spoke with some of the locals, our prosecuting attorney at the time, our sheriff at the time, and they gave stories about people's encounters with they had gone and investigated. So yeah, we've heard about Bigfoot most of my entire life.
Right. Wow. Okay. Cool. So, so your first sort of encounter with him was 85, and then was the next one the one that you emailed me?
Yes,
All right.
yeah, that was,
So tell us
and I
about
believe that.
that one. I read that thoroughly, but tell us what happened there.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. A young man that I known my entire life, and he was as close to me as any one of my brothers. So I just called him my brother. He and I, it was opening day of bow season, and he knew a spot where he and his father had hunted quite a bit. And this was just outside the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. So we got there, and it was a couple hours before dark, and we just had planned on sleeping in the back of the truck. So we weren't going to set up a tent or anything like that for the night. I had told Rich, I said, well, I'm going to kind of go scouting around. And I'd gotten into the timber probably a quarter mile. And I heard something take off. And I knew it was an elk. So I cow called at it, and it turned around and came back. Well, and here's this nice Roosevelt elk, standing 30 yards in front of me, facing to my right. Well, when I shot, he jumped the string a little bit, and I hit him a little bit high. So I give him 45 minutes, an hour before I even went up to where he was standing when I shot.
Right.
And as I did that, I looked up to the timber, and I could see him standing up in the timber. So with the cover of the timber, I just kind of snuck up, and I got within 10 yards. And he was pretty fatally wounded, I think, at that time even. But I was able to get another shot at him. And when I did, he kind of took off a little ways. He went about 10 yards, and I thought he was going down a hill because it was starting to get dark in the timber. But what had happened was he was actually bedded down, and his his antlers were rocking back and forth.
Right.
But I thought he was walking. Well, then I jumped him, and he went through this little patch of reprod. So I just let him be. I wasn't going to push him, and I got back to camp. I got kind of lost on the way out, and then it was dark, and I ended up hitting this clear cut, and I could see our campfire down there. So I went down there and told Rich what had happened, and he wanted to go see if we could find it since it wasn't very far away. Well, we got into the timber, and we had a lantern, which isn't the ideal thing for searching for animals anyway,
Yeah.
But I grabbed Rich. I seen a light coming through the timber at us. And Rich shut off that lantern. We were just sitting there watching it, but there was no noise at all.
Was it a white light, Don? Like a white color?
It was
white. Like a flashlight?
We initially thought it was a flashlight.
Right.
But there was no beam or anything. It was just a light coming at us. And it got within 20 yards of us probably, and then kind of went off in the direction where I thought my elk was.
Right.
So we just hightailed it out of there because it spooked the heck out of both of us.
I guess.
And we come out, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 miles from the pickup. I mean, I don't know how we got that turned around in there. I mean, I can see it using a lantern. It's not real great,
Yeah.
But we got back to the truck. And we just sat in the truck all night talking about it. And right before daylight, we got up and went back in. And we took the same route that I had taken the evening before, and I shot the elk. And I told him I shot it right here the first time, and right up here the second time, and that's the reprod that he went through. Well, there was a big fir windfall laying in the middle of this little reprod patch. It couldn't have been 50 by 50, this reprod. And I jumped up on this windfall, and I started walking down it, and one of my arrows, about halfway down this tree, one of my arrows was stuck in the very top of the tree, and the other one was sticking out of the side of it, perfectly in line with each other, like somebody had stabbed them in there. I mean, it just still baffled my mind.
Yeah.
As to how those arrows got like that. Well, when we got through that little patch of reprod, the bull was laying there, and he was laying on his right side, but he was missing the whole front right shoulder that he was lying on. And we couldn't see bear tracks or anything, and hadn't really thought of what this was. All we knew it wasn't right.
Yeah. So the front shoulder was torn off, and it was laying on that side.
It was laying on it. Yeah. Yep. I don't know. And at that time, we thought maybe a bear or a cat had gotten in there, but I don't know. A bear could have rolled it over easily enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being in September when bears started to feed hard.
Yeah. Right.
But my buddy Rich, so he didn't ever want to talk about it.
I bet. Wow.
That was pretty creepy.
So did you guys obviously harvested the rest of the elk and took it out of there? Or?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We boned it out and packed it out. Yeah.
Right. And no sign around there of bear or anything like that? Not
that we could notice. And I'd gone back up there in that general area, predator calling once.
Yeah.
And I didn't even see bear in there or anything else. Elk, of course there were elk.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, you know as well as I do, bears, what they're going to do is they're going to go in, a grizzly's going to go in, maybe chew on it a little bit, but bury it. Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's something we have just black bear.
Yeah.
Well, at the time, that's all we.
Yeah. So if you've got black bear, they might eat a little bit of it or whatever. And cause they're not as sticky on it, stinking and being rotten. They'll kind of eat it fresh or whatever and possibly bury it as well. But they're not gonna tear a quarter off.
Yeah, and just disappeared.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some fur laying around and whatnot,
Yeah.
but we couldn't really tell where it had gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
that's not an easy thing to do. Rip a quarter off an animal. I mean, it's even an elk. I do a lot of
Right.
moose. I do a lot of moose hunting, but I've shot a lot of elk as well. And an elk quarter is it's tough enough when you've got a knife and you can actually get in there and cut the cartilage and tendon and whatnot and pop it off or whatever. But to do that, just no person's doing that, right?
No, not absolutely not.
Wow. So you didn't see any sign of anything. You didn't hear anything. Just that light is a key thing for sure.
Yeah, so that's what we got kind of thinking about was that light. And years later, my wife had bought me a DVD on Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And one of the native beliefs, especially in that area, is that the Yakima Indians, Colville Indians, Macaws, is that a light actually follows Bigfoot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that lots. There's that's not something I've ever experienced, but I have heard so many different accounts of there being an orb, some kind of a light, something, right? And even just the other day when I was talking with Fred up in Alaska, that's something that he's mentioned back in their heritage, that some sort of a light source or whatever. And I like say for me personally, I've never seen anything like that, but there's far too many accounts of that for it to not be connected, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's
right.
that part of it I don't quite understand. It's pretty wild, but I can't relate two and two there, but it's pretty interesting. That part of it's pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah.
So so you guys get the elk out, you do your thing. Are you out of there? Did you?
Oh yeah, immediately.
You're gone. Yeah.
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 Yep.
Yeah.
And I still haven't been back there. Rich's sister spread his ashes there as they did their father's
Oh yeah. Wow. Nice.
previously. And I went to Washington last summer, did some greater work for a friend of mine back there. I'll go back over this fall probably.
Right.
And maybe I'll go back up in there. But.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like when you like, tell me what went through your mind. You get there, you see that elk quarter ripped off. Like, did you immediately go, had to be one of them? Or were you kind of like, it could be this, it could be that, or did you just immediately go, no, it's one of them?
Well, I'm sure that's what we were both thinking because of that thing the night before, and then finding the arrows the way we did.
Yeah.
But like I mentioned in my letter, Rich and I never really talked about it much after that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a pretty unnerving deal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I don't blame you. And that's the thing, right? A lot of people, myself included, a lot of people just, for years and years and years, I never talked about it at all. Not with anybody. Right. I just didn't. And, I first ran into these things for the first time in like 91 and several times after that, 91, 93, 95. So there was always a bit of a gap or whatever. And then nothing for a long, long time. And I just kept it quiet. It's not something we really talked about. There's one good friend of mine that's First Nations man, and we've known each other for 35 years. And I talked to him about it, but it's for them. It's taboo. It's, you don't, like, for his people anyways, they don't talk about it, and they were told not to talk about it. And he even said to me, like, he's like, don't ever bring it up around me. And he goes, no offense, but he goes, it's just bad, right? And Fred kind of reaffirmed that when I talked to him the other day, that now finally people are starting to come out. But what's really strange is, I'm like you. It's just something that I didn't discuss with anybody. And then finally, when I connected with Steve Isdall, I talked with Steve about it, and I'm like, you know what? If Steve can talk about it, so can I. And so him and I both discussed it and talked about it, but from that point on, things just went crazy. Like, I'm out all the time. I do a lot of river fishing, lake fishing, ocean fishing as well, hunting, and I'm out all the time and just hiking and whatnot, spending nights and weeks out in the bush. And ever since that time that I spoke with Steve, there's always something going on. Not always, not every trip by any means,
Right.
but if I go out 10 times, in those 10 times, one time something's happening. You know, I've had eagle feathers stuck in a stump, right where I set my pack down one day, went down to the river, filled my water bottle, walked back up like 5 minutes to walk down to the river, and I just have my pack leaning up against a stump, and I get up to the old rotten stump, and there's an eagle feather stuffed into the top of the rotten stump right at my pack. You know,
Yeah.
it didn't fall off the eagle and go stab into the stump, right?
Right. Absolutely. Oh,
But it's just strange how once you sort of I don't know, is it maybe once you talk about it or once you sort of accept it that things maybe happen a little bit more. Have you ever had any more since then, Don? Like, have you had anything happen since then? Have you had any kind of sounds out there, that feeling that there's something around you? That's another big one, like especially for someone like you, an avid outdoorsman hunter, that sense that something's here, man.
yeah, yeah. It's been about 2004 or 5, right around there. I was bear hunting up in a place called Rock Creek Basin, and one morning right after daylight, I heard this really loud howl, and it went on for 20 seconds probably,
Wow.
and then within about 10 seconds later, it did it again. But I thought maybe it was a vehicle of some sort, but up in this basin, there's really no roads, and it was that evening I'd gotten back home and was watching something about Bigfoot, and I heard that same exact howl.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that really creeped me out.
Yeah.
And then here just recently, well, the last spring, I guess it was, I seen on YouTube, a gentleman has a Bigfoot organization over there in Oregon. There was a sighting right in Stevenson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's right by Rock Creek where I hunted, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of bear hunting back there when I was living there. So
Right. Yeah, I think Oregon's a pretty hot spot, isn't it?
yeah.
Areas of Oregon, areas of Washington, I think there's some pretty serious hot spots there. It's funny how that sound can absolutely scare the living shit right out of even the most seasoned person, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just unnerving,
Yeah.
and you can't place it. You can't visualize what it's coming from, or
Yeah. Your mind just goes for something to make that kind of a sound. You don't really want to see where it's coming from, right?
right.
Yeah, I had the same thing happen. I think it was like '93, and I was on a late season mule deer hunt, and I was hiking up a valley, and I knew the area quite well. And I was hiking up the valley. There was about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. I was following a creek up the valley to the drainage to the bowls where the deer would be hanging out, and I was about halfway up, which is about 2.5-3 hours from my truck, and I was going to camp up there. And exactly what you're talking about. When you said that, it kind of sent shivers up my spine, because it was like pretty much like what you said. I was just hiking along, and I just heard this thing roar. It was kind of a cross between almost like a lion's roar, like a big lion. And I don't mean cougar, I mean lion, like African lion, like something like that, and then something like I've just never heard before, and so deep, and just vibrated right into my body, like stopped me in my tracks and just vibrated my inside my body. And it same thing. It probably went on for, I'd have to say, at least 15 or 20 seconds. And
Yeah, no, it was.
and I did the same thing. I was out of there, man. And that's the one place I love the area. I love the whole region where that happened, but I've never been back to that valley ever. Never went back
Right.
there again, because it just shook me to the core. So, Don, what's your take on these things? what are they in your opinion? I like hearing different people's opinions. On what are they? Where did they come from? What are they? How long have they been here? Like, what's your take on them? Are they
You know,
dangerous? All these questions.
I think they can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, I've never had other than that one rolling rocks down toward our camp. I mean, if we had stayed, who knows what would have happened,
Yeah.
But we were young kids, 15, 16 years old, and just got out of there as quick as we could.
Right. Right.
And I hear mixed feelings on everything. I have friends that belong to the Yakima Nation, and they're like you were talking about. They don't eat. They call them stick Indians.
All right.
I've heard stick Indians, different things, but they don't even like to talk about it. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, I mean, you hear a lot of different people. I don't follow a lot of YouTube channels myself. I just don't really have much time to do it or whatever. But the couple people that I know, like Fred, Steve, that I consider legit. And you know what? In my opinion, nobody's an expert on these people. Nobody.
No. No.
I think there's people out there that certainly are very knowledgeable about them. Like in my opinion, Melba Ketchum, I think Melba did some phenomenal work on the scientific end of things. Are you familiar with that Genome project?
No, I'm not.
Oh
actually.
boy, you you want a good read? It's online. It's called the Sasquatch Genome Project.
Okay.
By Dr. Melba Ketchum, and Melba's a professor, very very smart lady, and she brought in several other professors, scientists, to start doing research on these beings, and they collected, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe they collected somewhere around 5,000 samples were sent into them. Hair samples, flesh samples, so on and so forth, and I believe it was somewhere around 5,000 samples sent in, and there was literally basically just a couple of handfuls that were legit. Not that people were trying to bluff them, but lots were sent in. And it was bear, buffalo, bison, whatever. But there was other ones that were sent in that were legit, and so they did DNA on these samples. They did DNA on the hair and the flesh samples, and they proved, and I'm not the brightest light bulb in the house, right? Like I'm a bush guy. I'm a simple bush man, and but my wife works in healthcare, and both my daughters work in healthcare as well. And so when I read the Genome Project, I said to them, I'm like, hey, I don't mean to sound stupid, but I'm like, I think I know what DNA is, but can you explain it to me? And they did, and then once I got a handle on what DNA actually is and whatnot, so their study proved that the origin is the male part of the DNA is unknown species, and the female part of the DNA is female human.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, heard where they find hair samples they've tested that they say is human, but also ape.
Yeah.
And they're finding this stuff here in the U.S., especially in the Pacific Northwest. I can honestly say I've never seen an ape in Skamania County anyway.
Yeah.
Or anywhere I've hunted. But I've heard lots of stories about one of my friends' dads. He was an older gentleman. When he was young, back in the 40s or 50s, he'd go outside. His parents sent him outside to go play and stuff, and he tells Dad, he'd come home today, there's monkeys in the trees. Things like that.
Yeah.
Just stories like that you hear from the old timers that are.
Yeah. And I mean, people might embellish certain things, make certain things up or whatever, but when it comes to stuff like that, like, why would a kid make that up? And that's relevant with what Fred Roll was saying. Like, there's stories of these forest people, hairy man, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, they go back thousands of years. They go back generation after generation after generation. I mean, there's petroglyphs in caves on rocks. There's masks. So like I'm certain that 500 years ago or however many years ago, like I'm certain that somebody wasn't sitting around, some nomad native tribe wasn't sitting around a campfire going, what can we think about? Let's make up a story about a great big giant hairy man, right?
Right.
Like that's just not going to happen. But it's interesting. Like seriously, if you want to, if you want a good read, there's a lot. This genome project goes on and on and on and on and on. But it certainly answers a lot of questions that how can the DNA be a male unknown species and a female human? And they're testing against every species known to mankind when they do these DNA. So they're testing against ape, chimpanzee, gorilla. Like they have samples of all that stuff, and the male portion is coming back as we don't know what the hell it is.
Yeah,
that to me is something else, right?
Right, that makes you think for sure.
Yeah. It sure does. Yeah. So, like, what's your personal take on them, Don? Are they a species of people that, like, what do you think?
Well, I've listened to some of the recordings. I've heard the recording where they're chatting back and forth.
Yep.
What was that? I can't remember what
That's
name of that one was.
that was in the Sierra Nevadas, Moorhead,
Right,
Ron Moorhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ninja chatter or something like that.
Yeah.
That stuff like that, it just kind of makes you think. I mean, they're obviously smart enough to hide, or depending on how you look at it, do they just appear or disappear? Things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know. It's hard, right? Like, for me, for years and years, like, I mean, almost my entire life, for me, I thought that they were basically like a prehistoric man. You know what I mean? Like a prehistoric people that just never developed like we did. They never evolved like we did and just chose to live isolated in the bush. Why were they so huge? Don't know. I never really, I never really asked myself that question. But I was always just like, they're a people, they're a tribe that live out there and live off the land. And, the whole thing about them, hunting and gathering. I mean, you're a hunter, I'm a hunter. I know damn well if I was forced to go live out in the bush, I could survive. And I would do pretty much anything that I needed to do to survive. And I think anybody, not just a seasoned bushman, I think anybody in a life or death situation, you're going to do whatever you have to do to survive, right? And if that's scaring somebody else away from your food resource, that's what you're going to do. You're going to do whatever you need to do to survive, right? Like, for me, it goes right back to your encounter. If it was one of these people, that they could have taken that whole elk.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They took a quarter and they left 3/4 for you.
Right.
And I had another email quite some time ago now, and I read it. And a gentleman shot a bear. I've had so many, but I know this guy was, I believe, bow hunting as well. Shot a bear, went down. The bear was expired, went down, and he either saw this being or something or whatever and turned to run, fell down, was unconscious. And again, I just can't remember the exact details, but he fell down, was unconscious. He came to miles from where he was, leaned up against the tire of his truck with his pack laying there beside him. And long story short, I guess he got in his truck, drove to town, but he had a tough time or whatever. His leg was so sore, he could barely get into his truck. He threw his pack in, drove into town, went to the hospital, ended up he had a broken leg. He called his brother. His brother came to the hospital. His truck was in the parking lot. The brother went out to the truck to take the truck home and was going to come back and get the brother after his leg was all taken care of and casted up. and there was half a bear in the back of his truck.
Yeah.
So how did
And if
how did half a bear get 2 or 3 miles from where it was killed into the back of his truck, and why is there half?
right?
Right?
Exactly.
Very similar type thing to your encounter, and I'm sitting there again. I'm going, could have taken your whole elk, and they didn't. Right?
Right.
They could
Yeah,
if
they
they
could have
if
packed it back to my truck for me.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty wild. So when you're out, Don, are are they in the back of your mind? Are they always in the back of your mind? Or are you
Always.
out? Yeah, yeah,
Always, yeah.
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 I guess once you have an encounter, you pretty much have to be on high alert, right? They could be anywhere at any time.
Yeah. Well, I quit taking naps in the woods when I'm hunting.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm
Not
guilty.
only,
I'm guilty. I still do that. Maybe I should stop.
well, yeah, no, it's, well, it's the thought of those people, and then, of course, over your Montana cats, things like that. I don't
Yeah.
really don't want to be
Yeah. You
a
don't want
meal
to be
for
a
a cat.
statistic, right?
All right.
Yeah. 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 It's funny when I was talking to Fred there the other day. He said his whole life, he goes, we were told and taught not to whistle in the woods, not to talk when we're in the woods, like all these different things. And I'm going, God, that's like I don't whistle in the woods, especially when I'm hunting. But if I'm out just hiking or steelheading, whatever, I'm whistling and talking and stuff. And I'm going, oh boy, I got a big sign on me saying here I am, right? But the other thing too, and I'd like to know how you feel on this. Like for me, it it bothers me. It kind of bothers me that knowing that they're there. It certainly keeps me aware, but I will never stop going out there, and I will never stop doing what I'm doing. And because a lot of people say to me in my comments, they're like, you're insane for going out there without a gun. And my response to that is, like sometimes, unfortunately, here in Canada, we can't carry a sidearm, right? Which drives me nuts.
Right.
We can carry a high-powered rifle that can shoot 3 or 4 miles, but we can't carry a pistol to protect ourselves. But anyways, so it's either you got to carry a defender or a rifle or something. Most of the times I carry my defender, but sometimes I just don't. Like when the bears are put to bed, I generally don't carry my defender because out there, all you really then have to worry about is maybe the odd cougar. But anyways, I go out, I do my thing, and I don't carry a gun. But I'm like, a gun's not going to do anything. If when it comes to these people, these things, if they approach you or they come up to you or whatever, you see one, a gun's useless. It's not going to do a damn thing, you
Right.
know. And I just go, I'm going to go out and do what I love, and I don't know if that's the way my life ends. Well, I mean, it's just the way I am. If my life ends out there, that's fate. I believe it's all for me personally. It's just I believe our lives are all predetermined, and we have a set date, and nothing's going to change that date. So just give her hell and enjoy yourself as much as you can, right? And I'm not going to stop doing it. It sounds like you're the same. You do what you want, you do your thing, and it's in the back of your mind that they're there, but you're just going to continue, right?
Oh, absolutely. I still hunt.
Yeah,
I go out in the woods as much as I can.
yeah, yeah. Interesting that you don't take a nap. Maybe I should stop doing that. Well, listen, Don, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your encounter with us, man. You know, that's what this is all about for me is just to make people aware of what's going on, and I kind of feel like my whole life, anyways, that in a way we've been lied to and told that these things don't exist. They're not real. They're just a myth. And I know for a fact they're not. And
Right.
I think for a fact that they're not, and there's thousands and thousands of people across the world that know for a fact they're not. And for me,
Right.
it's just about educating people, and I want people to go out and enjoy the wilderness and the outdoors because I feel sorry for people that have never seen that. And that's what I try to do on my channel, right? Is share the beauty of the outdoors because for
Oh,
me,
yeah, for sure.
so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that, and I'd love to get together with you again sometime soon and chat some more.
You betcha. You bet. And
Yeah.
I hope one of the other brothers out there can maybe shed some light on that on the situation. Maybe somebody has a story similar. Or
Yeah.
it'd be kind of.
Yeah. I'm actually really curious to. I'd like to hear, and I'm sure we will when I post this video. I'm sure, I tend to get a lot of comments, and I want to know what people think about this light. Because again, it's just something I've never seen. I've had it captured on my camera before. And when I go to edit my video, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like something goes right in front of the camera, like some kind of a light or whatever. So I have seen it in that respect, but I've never seen it like you did with my own two eyes.
Yeah.
So I'd like somebody to shed some light on that. So if there's anyone out there that can sort of put two and two together there for Don and I'd appreciate it. I'm sure you would too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, man, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
And you've got my email. Don't be a stranger. Certainly reach back out, and if I'm ever coming through Montana, I'll look you up.
Oh, you better.
You bet.
Yeah, you'd like it.
Oh yeah.
All right.
I appreciate it, Don. Thanks very much. You have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You as well, sir. Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, my friend.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.